Thank you for joining us for today's London Java community event with Henna. Let me introduce myself for those of you who don't know me. My name is Abby and I work with Barry Cranford, who's the founder of the LJC, and I have the privilege of hosting today's event. For those of you who don't know as well, the LJC is just one of 15 different communities run by RecWorks. RecWorks are a tech recruitment company with a massive difference. So as a company, we believe that recruitment really can be a force for good in the industry beyond just placing people in jobs. We have a particular focus on learning, mentoring, and personal development. If people want to learn and others want to teach or share their knowledge, we are happy to connect you through all our communities and events that we run. We see this as giving back to those we've worked with in the past, but also paying it forward to those we hope to work with in the future. To date, we have run hundreds of events for engineers, developers, students, graduates, and CTOs. We have run conferences, lightning talks, hackathons, mingles, all sorts. Earlier this year, we made our 4,000th introduction through our Meet a Mentor program. We're really excited about that and looking forward to making our 5,000 introductions. As I've already said, we love to give opportunities for people to connect, and this event is part of that. If you would like to know more about any of our communities, please do get in touch with myself, Barry, or Helen Lewis if you know her, and we can take it from there. The recording of today's session will be available on YouTube. I can give you the link to our channel in the chat, but also we will obviously send a post out when it's available for you to view as well. And with no further ado, I will hand over to Henna for her amazing talk from MongoDB to mobile. Over to you, Henna.
Thank you so much, Abby. Thanks a lot for all the introduction. Really delighted to see how many communities you are handling, and definitely want to know more about that. I'm passionate about communities myself. So hello, everybody. Good afternoon to you all, and thank you so much for making the time to be here today. My name is Henna. I'm community manager for mobile at MongoDB, and today I'm excited to talk about from MongoDB to mobile. But before that, I want to give a brief information about me. So yeah, I'm passionate about communities, as I mentioned, and these are some of my community highlights. I am also co-organizer for Google Developer Group's Dublin chapter and Women Techmakers Dublin, and now MongoDB User Group Dublin. So these are some of the highlights from the events that we have had. Below is my team at MongoDB, and now we have more people in the team. And if I'm not coding or giving talks, I like to spend some time on crafts, painting, cross-stitch, and quilling. So how this idea of project came into mind. So I have a colleague in office who made a restaurant finder application and added a feature of Atlas search where you can search the restaurants and locations. For me, I was like, I want to convert this into a mobile app as well. So hence came the idea of a restaurant app finder, it using the same data that this app is using, but different kind of mediums to look at the app, a website and a mobile. So there's a brief demo that I'm going to play and show what the application looks like, and then we'll dive deeper into the components that help create that application. So in the beginning, you start with an authentication screen. Authentication is important because that's how you know which user is logging into the app and then can associate that data to that particular user. And when next time you open the app, the data is saved and that can show you what all you have saved in your application. So as you logged in, you are given two options. Either you search for a location or cuisine that you want to search, or you can search the combination of both. The locations are within the New York for this particular demo, but you can add more locations and more cuisines as you kind of expand your application scope. So I selected Bronx and I am using two different email IDs. So the application is shared. Any change made by one person will be visible to the other person. So the sync is bi-directional happening here. I open a restaurant that I want to go to. I add a review of that restaurant, and the other person, when they open that the same restaurant, can see the review that got added by the person. And they can also add a review if they want to add, and the first person will be able to see the review that got added. So this also works when your application is without internet. So you can switch off the internet and kind of see the functionality there as well. You can make changes to your app. And as soon as you come online back again, the changes will be synced bidirectionally on both the devices. Either you add from the cloud or either you add from the mobile. The changes will be synced to your application. So is there a question in the chat? I'm just going to see. Okay, no, there's the link in the chat. So as soon as the device is online again, it will be syncing the data. So let's move on to what components are used to create the application. So the agenda for today is we're going to talk about MongoDB Atlas and what app services it offers, what is device sync, and what is Realm database that is being used here, offline persistence, and some of the community resources that are available to you that you can use for learning and experimenting with Atlas and Realm. So Atlas is a fully managed multi-cloud global data distribution. Can I ask all the folks here if you have had any prior experience with Atlas? Anyone here have used MongoDB? And mobile developers who have created any applications? So a good deal of information to experiment and explore some new technology. So Atlas can be offered multi-cloud regions. You can choose any cloud provider and you can select from any regions. I will show how that is done in the next slides. And you can there's a free cluster that is available that you can create and experiment with the data available. And we have both shared and dedicated clusters as well. And other app services that will operate on your data, which is in Atlas, would be functions, triggers, GraphQL, HTTPS, endpoints, and more. So for this application, how does the cloud architecture look like? So you have a mobile, you're using Realm SDKs, you use device sync feature of Atlas on that. So, but the other features that are also available are functions, triggers, data API, and GraphQL, as I explained at the previous slide. So what is device sync that we are using in this application? So the high-level components for that demo that I showed you are two Android devices. They're using device sync feature, and Atlas is the common backend they have between both, and both are syncing data to and fro from each other. So Realm SDKs that you use on your mobile application are available in 7 different tech stacks: Kotlin, Java, Flutter. So whatever tech stack you want to use, you can choose the SDK accordingly. And then we have device sync, which is available in 2 types: partition sync and flexible sync. I'll explain more what both of them means. And then there are 2 modes: from mobile to MongoDB or from MongoDB to mobile. For this session, we're going to be exploring from MongoDB to mobile. And then we have Atlas app services, which are functions, triggers, authentication, and more. So let's talk about the sync modes. Development mode and generate schema mode. So say you don't have any data in Atlas and you want to go create your application from scratch from mobile, and then you want to sync your data to backend. So you turn the development mode on there, you create all your application, any tech stack that you want to follow, you create your data models, you execute the application, and then your schema gets populated to Atlas. And as and when you operate with data on the mobile, the data from the mobile will sync to Atlas. But this mode, this is not recommended that you keep development mode on in production mode, because when the development mode is on, anyone can access your application and can make changes to your schema. For sync to work, your schema on your mobile has to confirm your schema to Atlas. Another option is generate schema mode. So for example, you have data in Atlas, you are already using your web applications, and now you want to go from your back into your mobile. So you can use generate schema mode. So Atlas provides a schema utility in which it will sample your documents. You can choose the number of documents you want to sample, and it generate the schema for you. And it will generate in all the 7 SDKs that I showed you. You just have to copy that schema and to your mobile, add the business logic, and then start syncing from your Atlas to your mobile. The data that I'm doing here, the restaurant data is in Atlas, and I synced that data to my device and saw those locations and cuisines operating in the UI on the device. And we'll now go into more detail. How is that happening? So sync types are also of 2 types: partition and flexible sync. So you have a lot of data in Atlas. You have multiple applications that are synced, that are linked to your cluster. But you do not want all the data should come down to your device. So how do you define those limitations, that how and what amount of data should be synced? So partition sync is a feature where you define the partition key. So value of that partition key will determine what amount of data will get synced to the device. So partition here, if I use partition sync, I can define key as city. So city will be New York. And if I define city as New York in my code logic, all the restaurants in the New York are going to get synced to my mobile. If I add San Francisco and Austin further down, if I expand the application scope, then I can have more cities generated. But for the moment, only New York will be downloaded. The other cities will not be downloaded. Depending on the application logic, you can change the partition city and download Austin or San Francisco as required. With the flexible sync, it offers more flexibility to what you can sync to your device. So you can also call this as query-based sync. Say, for example, I'm running a query, find this location and find this cuisine that I want to look for. So only those values will then be synced to your device. Not any other data will get synced to the device. For this, you have to define queryable fields, like which fields would you be querying on. So I'm defining, for example, here they are linked as borough, cuisines, and grades. But depending on how your schema is designed, you can add up to 10 queryable fields. We'll talk in more detail what that means. So queryable fields are the fields that the SDK will query on, and you want to subscribe to changes. So whenever a queryable field is used in an application and any changes are made to that on the cloud or on the mobile, the changes will be reflecting on the UI. You will have, it's a reactive UI that it's going to display the change on the data immediately to your UI. So, but for now, only top primitive level fields can be selected as queryable fields. The list can be selected, but they should not go deeper down, because then it will become for sync. The sync will become difficult to handle there. For subscriptions, like I mentioned in the previous slide, that you can subscribe to the changes in data, and that is how it is done. Cuisine, it's American. For borough, it's Bronx. You can change, and then that will lead to the subscriptions being updated, added, required, and removed as you move on with your application logic. Also briefly how those subscriptions and queryable fields have been defined in the application. So what are permissions? So permissions is a very powerful system here in flexible sync. You can define permissions per document and even field level. So it offers that much of granular filtering. For the restaurant app, I'm using rules that are defined on the left column. So there are default rules and there are normal rules. So for default rules, that would mean it applies to the whole application, like all the collections that you have in your database. But for normal rules, you can define rules on collection basis, like the format shown on the right at the bottom. You can define rules on particular collections as your application logic requires. So permissions are determined by a session role, which will have a name and apply when expression, and then set of read and write rule expressions, as shown in the left column. I've made it very simple. This can get, because it's a very powerful system, you can define multiple level of permissions. So I've kept it at the easiest level so that no apply when and no normal rules are there. Only the read true and write true, and the fields, as you see, only the review collection will have the ability to change the data. The rest of the data you cannot change because the right is false for the other fields there. So now let's get to see some demo. We'll create an Atlas cluster. I've recorded this so that it's a little time-taking process. So when you create an account at mongodb.com, you will be given an option to define a cluster. You chose the provider, you chose the location, and then you change the cluster name. Cluster name can be defined only once, so be careful when you define a name. It cannot be changed later. So once you create the cluster, you define the username and password. This username and password will give the ability to access your data on the cloud. Say, for example, you want to load some data on the cloud directly into Atlas. This is the username and password that you can use. And also MongoDB provides some GUI tools, which is MongoDB Compass and Data and Mongo Shell. You use the same username and password to access the cluster from the respective tools. And then you also list your IP address or all the IP address where you want the data can be accessed from. Otherwise, the data access will not be allowed to other IP addresses. So this will take some time, and once created, the cluster is going to look like this. So Atlas also comes with sample data set that you can experiment on. I have already loaded the sample data set because it takes 2-3 minutes to load all of data. And then I will show you how it looks like. So I loaded the sample data from here and I will browse collections, what amount of data that got loaded. So this is the sample data got loaded in your cluster. You can experiment with any. So I'm using the restaurants database and restaurant collection from here. You can use Data Explorer to run some simple queries. It may not allow you to run very complex queries, but it can definitely allow to run simple one. Just to see how the functionality works. So this will display the data only in Bronx location. So we created the cluster, we loaded the sample data. So next step is to create an app service application. So what does that mean? So when you want to create an application, so this is creating your backend for your mobile application. This will offer you a lot of options that you can choose from. If you're using Sync, you can choose the tech stack that you want to create from. And if you're using any application with React, with Run Web SDK or GraphQL, you can choose the template code from here and see how this is done and experiment and learn from there. But for this purposes, we're going to build our application from scratch. So this is the cluster name that we created initially. This is the name of the application. So any name that you want to name or meaningful name that you want to provide. And this is the location and cluster and global or single. So this is default. It is advisable that you select the same location as your cluster location and it will automatically pick up that location. So I'll keep the same as my cluster location was there. The application will be, I'll keep the same as this. So I would not go into deeper explanation, but there is a reason why we keep the same, but we'll discuss this some another day maybe. So this is the application guides that are available that you can follow. How to use GraphQL, triggers, endpoints, SDK, and this will give you some step-by-step guidance on how to get started with each of these functionality. But for this purpose, we'll close the guides. So now we created the application and the next step is to enable authentication. So this authentication is different from what we created username and password earlier. This authentication is for your mobile application. So RUM provides several authentication providers that you can choose from, but we're using email password. So we will enable that, but we'll keep the functionality default, not make a lot of changes to that. But yeah, this provides an ability to reset functions and create functions from there. There's also is an option that whenever you make changes, you review your draft and then save. Otherwise, your changes may not get saved if you don't save your draft. So we enable authentication, and the next step is to generate schema from restaurant collection. So let's see what that means. So for this moment, my application does not know which data it will be using. So I'm going to tell my application which data from the Atlas data I'm going to be using. So I have two modes, either generate a schema or I turn the development mode on and do everything from my scratch, but I'll go with generate a schema option. So now this is asking how many documents in the restaurants collection it should sample, because MongoDB offers flexible schema, but for Realm mobile application, your schema has to match. So the schema generation is important here. So I'll choose 10,000 documents and this will generate the schema automatically from me. And I will just have to copy that schema and paste it in my mobile application, connect this backend with that, and this will work. This may take a few seconds, but I have already generated the schema for this application. So once generated, this is going to look like this. I don't have to do anything else. It's going to generate its own. But yeah, live demos often takes time. So the next step would be, we will enable flexible device sync. So yeah, this is generated. No, this is the older. Yeah, this is generated. I'm going to save the draft. So the collections that I showed you earlier, so this generated the schema based on all the documents in the collection. And now we'll be enabling device sync. As I mentioned, there are two types of sync, flexible and partition based. We'll go with the flexible sync. So development mode, you can turn on the development mode for now as well, because this helps in making changes to your schema. If you want to make any changes to your schema, there are two ways. You turn this development mode on and you change everything from your mobile application, or you make the changes directly on the cloud. But at the moment, we don't have any schema that we can change from mobile application. So we'll keep it off. We'll select the cluster. We'll define these queryable fields. So these are the fields that are there in the restaurant collection. But if you add a new collection and you notice that I do not have reviews here. So review is the collection that I added later once I created my, once I copied my SDKs from there. And then the review fields will also be visible here. At the moment, they're not visible because the collection is not there. So here is where you define permissions. You can select from any default template. But since I want that only reviews collection should have write access, not all of the other, or not of the all other fields in the collection, I will be using a custom one. And I already have these saved with me. So it is the same rules that I showed you on the slides earlier on the left side. So I only want reviews to have true. Rest of the fields, the write permission should be false. And this is that I enabled sync, and then I will be saving the draft. And now we will see where it got generated. So this is the section where your object models will be automatically generated. So this is the tech stack that will be generated in. I'm using Kotlin. So I will be copying all this and in my mobile application, link the Atlas backend with my mobile, and I'll be able to sync data from MongoDB to my mobile. But the reviews is not there. So how do I make changes? I did not make the development mode on. So what I did was I went on the cloud on the restaurant section and I added the reviews here. So the reviews is not there at the moment. I will be adding the reviews, and you will see that the schema will automatically get generated in the Realm SDK section as well. So this is saved, and when I go to there, my models, my review model is generated. So these are the three fields that I have. This is not in Kotlin, but yeah, it's showing in Kotlin. Maybe I should refresh the page. Yeah, this is the reviews that are generated now. And now I only need to copy all these object models in my mobile, and I will be able to link the data. So are there any questions in chat? Can I keep questions at the end? I will read the questions at the end. Okay, so where were we?
Yeah, that's fine. I just let people know they can post them as we go along, but that's fine. We can do Q&A after.
Okay, so where we are. So we enable flex device sync. So our last step is to create a mobile application and connect Atlas app ID and the copy SDK schema to mobile. For this one, I'm using Android IDE. I'm making an Android application. So this is the ID that you need to copy. And when you go to app services, this is the one application that I created, and you can create a new app and it will show you the same model on how to create that. So, or you can create from template and it will show you which template to use from there. So this was the application I created, and this is the app ID that I need to know. Once I add this app ID on my mobile application, my backend is connected with my mobile app. So we'll find out how that is done. So this is done. So Realm database, how you create a mobile application. What is Realm database? So Realm database is the database that lives on the disk. So whenever you are creating any mobile app, say you are following React Native, Flutter, Kotlin, any tech stack, sometimes there's a need for an application where you need to save data. So Android offers a lot of inbuilt options as well. So there are SQLite, there are shared preferences, but there's a limitation to what amount of data you can save. So Realm is a database that you can add as a library there, and it is a lightweight container. It will store your data as objects that can be filtered. So sometimes Realm can also be considered as a programming language. So it is so much easier to filter, query, and sort data with Realm. That is, sometimes we compare it as an equivalent of a programming language. And the objects are live and reactive. So that is, as soon as you make any changes to your data, it will be immediately reflected on your UI, and it's ACID compliant as any other database. So this is the Realm query language, the string-based query language that I was talking to you about. That queries are passed to Realm query engine, and these are the objects and classes that gets generated and that can be queried on for the data. And we'll check some code on how all these are playing together for generating the data that I've used in my application. So this is the Realm object model. That is a Kotlin class that I've created. It is extending Realm object class. That means I want to tell this tell Realm that I want to persist this data on my local device. So like any other language, you need a primary key for that database. So object ID _ID is the mandatory primary key because MongoDB recognizes uniqueness through _ID. So it's the same that we'll use in the mobile app as well. And this is reviews is of type Realm list. And then how do you build your application? So say, for example, this was Android, but if you have any other device that you are using, this is two code applications that will link your backend to your mobile app. But what does the global class means? So this is a Kotlin class that extends application. In Android, application class is the class that's going to stay alive throughout the life cycle of the application. So we need the application throughout active for connecting our backend with the mobile app. So these two lines of code are defined in that class that is going to stay active throughout. So this is the Realm app ID where you will copy from the cloud and place there, and this is where it is called to build the application. So authentication. I was using email password authentication, but equivalent to all the other authentication providers that we had, Facebook, Apple, and Google, the APIs are available similarly for all of them. Both asynchronous and synchronous APIs are available. It's always recommended that you go with asynchronous so that you do not block your UI thread. So this is where a user is registering the user if the account is not already created. When the account is created already, the user can just pass email password to log in into the account, and then it goes to the next activity or next UI screen. So activity here in Android means screen, your UI screen there. So how you set up the sync configuration? First, I'm using a builder pattern here. So you define your initial subscriptions, like what data you want to subscribe to, and then you can add or update or remove your subscriptions as you go along with your business logic. But this is a static string when it goes to the backend. So anytime when you want to change it, it's recommended that you update it instead of keeping the static string throughout. Otherwise, it will give error if you are adding a subscription twice. So this is downloading the whole restaurant data in your mobile application. So there's a purpose to it. Say, for example, you are in an area where there is no internet and you want to search for Manhattan location, and Manhattan, you had not searched location before at all. If you had not searched that location before, it's likely that location is not on your mobile at the moment, and you would need internet to sync your application. If you have synced once, then the data is stored locally on your device, and then when you are in a no internet zone, the local data will be accessed to show the location and cuisine that you search for. How do you open a Realm instance asynchronously? Again, Realm instances can be opened synchronously and asynchronously. And there are ways when you open synced configurations and local configurations. So sync configuration was the API for opening a synced Realm. So it's passing a callback object, and the results, or once the data is downloaded, it's going to run that query on the object that is retrieved. So I'm passing location and food. Whenever it changes, the query is going to run again and display that new data. So change listener is something that is making the data reactive in nature. It is observing the restaurant list. So anytime a location is going to change, this is going to trigger, and the new data is going to be reflected on the UI. So some of the community resources that are available for if you start interested in experimenting and learning more, our community.mongodb.com has plethora of questions and knowledge concepts. If you get stuck and if you're experimenting, you can search from there. And then we also have developer hub center to get started with number of languages that you want to go from. You can choose from JavaScript, Java, Python, and C# and some tutorials. So these are the template explanations, template apps that I showed you that you can choose any build application as well. The explanation of what that application includes is given on this link, and you can kind of find out and experiment with that as well. And also I'm doing a mobile developer community research. And if you know any folks who are using Realm or are interested in using Atlas and Realm, please let me know about them, or let them reach out to me, or reach out to me for that. I would love to know your feedback on how more mobile community can help you, MongoDB community can help you. And also, as my background, we are having MongoDB.local London on November 15th, and it is free event. And there will be a lot of talks on MongoDB and Realm and mobile, and there will be a community booth as well. So you can register yourself and come see me there, because I'm going to be there on that day. Okay. And some demo recap. We talked about creating an Atlas cluster. We loaded sample data there, generated Realm schema, note about partition sync and flexible sync, did a little brief on API and offline access, and hence bidirectional flow out of the box. So thank you so much, everybody, for being so patient. And now I'll be looking at questions and seeing what the questions have been asked.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Henna. So there were a couple of questions in the chat. So one was, why choose MongoDB given the wide variety of databases that are available?
So I would have to clarify a little here. I am talking about MongoDB on mobile. So MongoDB has a little difference to how MongoDB mobile works. So MongoDB is a document-based database, as you all know, and you can save JSON-based data. MongoDB is BSON. BSON gives more variety of fields that you can save data in, but when it is viewed, it is JSON formatted. So that's a better option. I think that's pretty more flexible than to save in a relational table-based format. But for mobile, for Realm, for mobile, MongoDB is slightly different in how it works with mobile applications. When MongoDB is used for mobile, MongoDB has replication and sharding options, but mobile does not offer that options at the moment. When you have sync available on your cluster, then your MongoDB cluster cannot be replicated and it cannot be sharded, or sharded clusters cannot enable sync. So there is a slight difference, but I would say the best option is what your application needs. If your application needs and demands suits a relational database, or if it suits better with a document-based database, you choose as based on the requirement of your applications.
Thank you. And another question that's just come in, can I use sync on a browser-based application instead of the mobile app?
You can use Realm Web SDK, but sync functionality, unfortunately, is still not available on browser yet. We are still experimenting with making that feature available, but browser sync is not there at the moment, I'm afraid.
Any other questions for Henna?
Yes, hi there. Can you hear me, guys?
Yeah.
Hi, cool. Hi, Henna. Thanks very much for the talk. I did have a question. So you mentioned the local DB.
Mm-hmm.
At first, I thought that wouldn't be the whole DB. It'd just be the bits that you've got in the schema that you're interested in. But it sounds like that is the whole DB updated in the background in case you go offline. Is that right?
Yeah, that is correct. So Realm database is the DB that lives on your disk. So say you want to sync an application data to your another device. So that is where Atlas comes into picture. You sync your data from your mobile to Atlas, and then from Atlas to your other device. Say I have 2 devices and I want same data on both the devices for that application. So this is where sync functionality helps a lot. Even when you're offline, you can make changes to your data. It's going to be there. And you're online again, it's going to sync the changes back to Atlas. So your data platform is same, but you can have multiple devices using that same data platform. So for this one, the website, the Atlas Search website finder that a colleague was making, it's using that same data that I'm using for a mobile application. Does that help?
Yeah, that makes sense. Great. Well, follow-up quick questions. So the syncing engine itself, is that a remote syncing engine? So is there like an intermediate broker that it's going through, or is that just I connect directly to the Atlas service or whatever, and that's it, that's the sync done? Is that right? So, or is it going through another service between my device and the back end, so to speak?
Yeah, those are the sync internals, I would say. But for you, the heavy lifting is done by Atlas and Realm itself. You only have to add the sync functionality, the sync dependencies in your IDE, in your application. But rest of the heavy lifting is done by Realm SDKs that you use in your mobile application. But absolutely, there would be some heavy lifting there because MongoDB saves data as form of documents, but your data in your mobile is in the form of object models. So that conversion is done by the sync internals, but you don't have to do any coding or implementation on that part.
Got you. Well, thanks very much.
Yeah, sure.
Excellent. Are there any other questions for Henna before I bring us to a soft close? I will take that as a no. So all that is left for me to do is to say thank you so much, Henna, for sharing that with us. That was really interesting, and every one of these sessions I love because I always learn something. So thank you for that. Thank you. That's okay. And thank you everybody for joining us as well. It's been really great to see you, and I look forward to seeing you at our next LJC event. Thank you for joining us. Have a great day. Take care.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.